Pastor Josh here with Tyler and Dawn. We're here to start off our Bible recap discussion. And like I've been posting online, if you'd like to participate, we've been reading chapters 1 through 11 through Genesis, and then also chapters 1 through 16 for the book of Job. And so the attempt of the Bible recap for this little jump is to try to stay as chronological as possible. So for those of you following at home, wondering why the back and forth, that's the attempt of the Bible recap, is to try to do it chronologically speaking. And now, if you have a chronological Bible, some of them don't always put the books in the same order, so just be aware if you are using a chronological Bible, there might be a little differences there with the reading order of the Bible recap. So, with that being said, let's get our discussion underway. Like I said, Genesis 1 through 11 and Job 1 through 16, and we are going to be using the Bible recap discussion guide as to kind of help guide our conversations, but we ain't going to stick to it like we have to, because there's some other things we probably saw, recognized, or want to maybe explore a little further.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Tyler looks like he's ready. So
I actually took notes for once, but we'll just start right off at number 1.
Okay.
Why do you think God gave us 2 separate accounts of creation, Genesis 1 and 2? I never really thought of it that way until the question was asked, but the way I took it is God was giving us the ability to separate us from the plants and the animals and the earth and all the other elements in the world, to show that we were created in his image, and that he takes us as, again, his image and embodiment of him. That's kind of where I was going with that. It's about everything that kept just coming back to his image, and how we are supposed to live. So
I agree. That's kind of what I wrote, is kind of the creation of life and then creation of human life in his image.
that's a better way of saying it.
I don't know about that.
No, that's good. Because I'm using a Jewish study Bible as we go through the Old Testament, and that's one of the things they point out, is that the second account of creation is centered more on human beings and the human experience, especially, of course, in connection and origin from God. And so I think sometimes the 2 creation stories can throw people off, but it got to realize that in the ancient world, sometimes they would change the order of things to serve a more theological purpose, or just like we talked about with the biographies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or Matthew, Mark, John, compared to Luke, which was written as a history. As sometimes people may look at the stories in Matthew, Mark, and John and be like, well, why does the order seem weird? Well, they're writing for a biographical purpose. So like, if we were to tell you something about our past and, maybe how crazy we were, we wouldn't necessarily share our stories in chronological order. But as far as like intensity of, of a description. So same way, still true, just a different order for a different purpose.
Yep. Well, just like in movies, you got your flashbacks, you got everything else to bring the story all together. So, and sometimes stuff don't make sense if you put it at the beginning, if chronologically, but you have to put it behind the other story. So that's
yes, absolutely.
So, but yeah, that's about the only way I could answer that question.
Well, I think part of it too, I think she hints a little bit about it, but I think I've seen in other places is that from chapter 1 to chapter 2, you see the progression. Is that me? Yes, that is.
I don't think it's me.
Okay. My bad, everyone.
This is real time.
Yes,
so.
It's very much in real time. From chapter 1 to chapter 2, we see God's name move from more general to more intimate, basically. So in chapter 1, we have, an Elohim, we have God. And then by the time we get into chapter 2, we get, in fact, they actually, in the Hebrew, have the Yahweh, the YHWH in there. And and when you have that name, that's signifies, intimacy and connection. And so, here God's creating Adam, and of course, then Eve shows up. There's a greater connection, especially when it compares to just God creating everything.
Yeah. And that's when you mention that, I keep thinking of other religions as well. You know, they all call him God, but if I said God, you wouldn't necessarily know who I was meaning, but Yahweh or the Father, anything like that, you know, you're speaking of our Christian God, the one and only. But you know, Muhammad, everyone else from there, they all call themselves God, but when it's like, we're both man, you're Josh, Don, and Tyler, you know, we know exactly who we're talking about. So so
absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Number 2 says, assuming we agree that God is the creator of all things, how do you view the creation narrative? As literal, allegorical, or a general reductive summary? How, if at all, would your faith be impacted if you found out you were wrong in that particular view and that one of the other views was accurate instead? Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
See, tough question.
Very much loaded question.
so that's one thing I really liked about this so far, is it makes you really think. There's a lot more to just reading what the word is. She's making you really think and test your faith and hopefully grow stronger in that. You know, you work out to stretch your muscles out, weaken them to bring them back together. And I feel like that's what she's doing here. So making you think outside the box to strengthen it in. So,
So what was your
I
thought out of the box?
I don't know. This is the one question I did not answer. We were talking about this before, but this is a hard question. I kept going back. I actually had to look up what allegorical meant because I wasn't quite sure. I was end up being right at the end, but I don't. It's one of those, until you put it in those categories, you don't never really think of it. So I took it as literal, is kind of what I end up deciding, because I was in between. I'm going to keep saying it wrong, allegorical and literal, but I just kept coming back to, this is the true word of God. Is, you know, these are what we talked about in our last podcast of being firsthand accounts from stories from people who've either seen it, heard it, or, you know, just wrote it down. So I went literal at the end of the day. I truly believe this did happen. And this was what God wanted us, the message to go.
I agree, and it was a simple thing to me, but not. It's just what I was taught from the very beginning, and so why would it not be true?
And I had that thought as well.
And I was just like, "What's literal?" Because that's what I know. That's what I believe, and you'd have a hard time telling me anything different. So.
Yeah.
I may have a problem if somebody told me this view was not accurate.
I almost wish he had, it's like the way these questions are written, it's like homework from when it reminds me of my religion book from Catholic school, honestly, the way these questions are written, but, and the way I wrote it in there, it looks like a little kid wrote it, but, I almost wish we got her thoughts on this as well. So I did notice she does have a podcast as well. I read on the back. So I think,
and I looked at some of the video stuff from the link on the bottom of the main book. Says to look more information. Of course, it doesn't directly go to the podcast, but there's links to videos and songs and stuff like that relate to the day. And
so I'm gonna have to get that on my daily.
Yeah, check out her podcast. But her podcast links were not part of the extra stuff. But
okay.
But you could go to the podcast.
But yeah, so but that's, I really want to, obviously there's no right answer. It's what you believe, but I kind of want to get her, you know, the person who wrote the question, what her input is. Yeah. So
one thing to note, and we talked about in the last podcast, I remember that this time, there's a book called 7 Days That Divide the World by John Lennox. Where he talks about the struggle of understanding the creation, chapters 1 and chapter 2, focusing, of course, on the first chapter. And one of the things that I appreciated is he points out, because there's a debate about, is is they're 6,000 years old or millions years old. And one of the things he notes is that either or, because the verb tenses in the first couple verses are different enough where you could say God created everything and then let things sit for a while and then molded everything together to start things. And he also says, the translation of days or times of the time periods could be literal 24-hour days or it could be, in a sense, periods.
And we did have that conversation as
we
well.
did.
So, because I truly believe it's not 24 hours. Because what our worldly hours, seconds, is based off how the earth works, where God's not on earth. He's in one of our beings. So what he determines as a day is what he determines as a day. So we talked about that,
Yeah.
If you want to listen to that, we have that on our
Go check out our Christmas podcast. But I want to make sure I brought the book this time because we talked about maybe doing a separate discussion on that. Because it's a fun little simple read. Check out that book. It's pretty thin, and I enjoy listening to John Lennox. He's getting older, but the amount of knowledge that man carries is just ridiculous. But he's so pleasant to listen to, and can be quite funny.
Yeah. So, what do you think, Josh, on question 2?
I've gone back and forth from. Well, in literal sense, but as far as like 7 24 hours or 7 periods, because again that John Lennox points out the verb tenses. It makes me think, okay, did God start, wait, and of course, if a day for us, if 1,000 years for us is like a day for the Lord, so I think again there's a literal, the creation count is literal. I think some science also backs that up as well. So that's kind of just where I'm at before I start rambling.
Yeah.
My mind was like, okay, there's like 30 different things I could say, and let's just
let's get it out now and go from there. So,
because we've got a lot of time to talk about all sorts of stuff. So don't try to get it all out in the first episode.
Yeah. For sure. Yes, we definitely have quite a few opportunities.
So let's go a little further into Genesis. Before we get into Genesis 6 and the flood story, what's your guys' thoughts of some of that inter-period time? So, like, if you had any thoughts about Cain and Abel or the Tower of Babel, did you guys have any thoughts about that?
It's been a while since I had even read that, so it was kind of like I hadn't really thought about it. It was kind of like fresh new material for me, and I had to kind of keep rereading it. I'm going, okay, it's a chain of events, but I hadn't really put it all together. You just remember Cain and Abel, but again, the whole timeline.
Yeah.
So I had to just keep going back and rereading that, and okay, that's.
I just had a life connection. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and listen to Joe Rogan whenever he has someone good on. I don't listen to everyone, but he had Jordan Peters on, and I listened to that one today. And Jordan Peters was talking a lot about, he talked a lot about the Bible and how he believes Jesus is a true person, and Joe's a skeptic, not gonna lie, but at the same time, he's, even in the last couple of years since I've listened to him on a regular basis, has gotten a lot more. He believes a lot more. I'm not saying he's a believer, not putting words in his mouth, but just kind of by the way he asks questions to other people, he's starting to believe, is what
It's absorbing.
Yes. And it's just funny because Jordan Peters started talking about Genesis, and I'm like, I listen on the Bible app is usually what I do, just to try to hear it and read it at the same time, or just try to listen and absorb as much as I can while I'm doing something else. And I just thought it was funny. It's like, well, that's what we're talking about, is that. And so it's just crazy how the Lord brings so much to you as you're trying to invest something in it. But Cain and Abel story has always been a hard one for me. I'm the oldest of 6. I have 4 brothers, and being the oldest, sometimes you're just expected to do something, like, get left out. I put that in quotations. That's just the best word I could think of. But I still couldn't imagine doing what he did. And I think what God also showed then is that if you are truly, he is willing to forgive you if you truly want to be forgiven. Where this is where my reading of it is where Cain truly he felt bad for killing him, but didn't feel bad for the action. Like he still got something out of it. So that's always a story that's stuck with me forever, from first time reading it till now, is just that situation, and couldn't imagine putting myself in it. What side would you be, kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's the one that's always hard for me to read. I don't know why. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's the protector of my siblings. I guess at the end of the day, you can't imagine being the one that hurt them. But
yeah.
So, yeah, that's the one that's always hard. And then the tower.
You could go back through that whole story of Genesis, though, and question Adam and Eve and their decisions, and then Cain and Abel. So, I mean, I don't know if we were confronted with that, what we would do. But, I mean, it was a...
the Tower of Babel and all of that. Like, I think, these first part of Genesis has shown us what not to do. It almost like
they're mistakes,
and it's almost like every time it was an eye opening for guys. Like, I didn't even think you guys could do this. Like I got to punish you. I still love you. And it reminded me a lot of parenting. Having a 2.5-year-old, sometimes it's all right. Like, I didn't even think you could do that. Now I still love you, but here you go. Like, we got to talk about punishment. But yeah, it's almost like that's what God was thinking. Like, I got to punish you, and at the same time, like, just like we said, if you're truly sorry for what you've done, let's take your punishment and move on. But if you're not, well, just like Tower of Babel and Sodom and Gomorrah and all the other ones, like.
So thinking about the digression then of humanity, so the temptation, in the garden, sometimes gets misconstrued, but it's that temptation to eat the fruit, to be like God, knowing good and evil, but that also that word there, to know, in the Hebrew, could also indicate, deciding for yourself or choosing what's good and evil. And so, of course, then from there we get the digression over and over and over and over again. So what I've observed myself in the human experience is that when we are confronted with moral issues, we try to justify ourselves. Well, I'm not as bad as that person, or at least I'm not a bad person. So we try to create our own moral justification. And so I think from the beginning we've always tried to create our own rules, create our own law books. I was just kind of curious what your guys' thoughts on that temptation to really to be like God, to determine good and evil.
My dad always called it putting your armor on. When you start getting defensive, you're putting your armor on. It's kind of something he's termed for not a whole lot, but enough when you really start getting defensive. And sometimes I feel we do that as Christians, we would never do that, talking about the Muslim world, we'd never be jihadist. Well, we were, we were that. So it's kind of just looking at yourself rather than others is at the end of the day where I kind of get with that is, just like what they always say, worry about yourself and not others, like kindergarten and everything else. So, but I think that's where we really, let's get ourselves there first before we start worrying about other people.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Don?
I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I was just kind of surprised when I reread Genesis, because I just don't. It's not one that I usually refer back to. So it was kind of all in new light to me again. And I think, correct, that God probably I think sometimes we were probably exhausting to him. I mean, to Adam and Eve, and it was just like he created one thing, gave him an option for something and they would choose the wrong way. But I also believe our God gives us that will to make to make our mistakes. It's just they started from day one.
That's
Yes.
I mean, and so it's just kind of like tell one lie and you have to do. I mean, it takes 2 more times to get out of that lie. I mean, it just
starts the snowball.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
that's-
again, I think God just looked back and thought, huh. I mean, I know this is a good thing of creation, but he just dealt with it continually.
That's one thing I've written several times throughout here is free will.
Yeah.
Like that's something God I felt like could take away. We live based off that's something he always gave us was the option for free will. And we have the choice every day to live in his image or to not. And I think that's where the Bible helps us keep us in his image. And that's those 2 words I wrote probably 3 or 4 times in here more than anything else. That and love. I don't know. I keep looking back at chapter or question 3 as we do this. So how does it feel to be pursued by God in the midst of your sins? Is it scary, comforting, threatening, or what? And why? I wrote down comforting. It shows no matter what, he will love us. He'll still punish us, but what did I say? I kind of wrote 2 of those questions together. So, but we will still be punished, but he will forgive us. He's not, as long as you truly ask for forgiveness and repent, he's right there, like a father figure, So that's, as we were talking about that, I just kept looking back down at that answer and like, that's about right where I'm at.
Well, that's what I appreciate in the book, in her little summaries, that she talks about mercy and grace and what those are. And a lot of people have the perspective that, God in the Old Testament is this big, angry being, where, he's basically this offering mercy after mercy after mercy, where he could have just, after the first sin, just like, that's it, you're done. But he extends that mercy. And then, of course, there's grace that comes. And so that's where I think when, I get to the flood, where God's not ticked off. It says literally he is saddened by what's going on, because I think, again, we forget that God is a God who wants to be in relationship and connection. So when people pull away and disobey and do things that are wrong, it's not ticking God off. It's saddening. It's
That's
heartbreaking.
a disappointment, probably. And that's kind of, we might have studied off of each other. 'Cause
We
that
only
was
work together every day.
That was kind of the same thing for me. It was comforting, but then I also followed up with, but to me, kind of undeserving, and question why he would want to keep pursuing us. So I think when I read through Genesis, I'm just kind of amazed that he continued. Because we weren't deserving. We just kept messing up, and he still kept, to me, pursuing us to be better, to have a better life.
He could have swiped us clean a long time ago and moved on to
Yes.
something else, but he kept to his project is the best way I could say it. He's so
Man, it just it's just left.
it happens.
Just left.
You're not old enough.
She tells me that every day too. So
I'm going to ask for mercy and grace, because I've been preparing for my ordination interviews, which are tomorrow.
good luck with that.
So I
By the
spent
way.
all day.
Oh, man.
It was like, okay, what was I thinking about when I was reading Genesis 3? But yeah, being pursued by God, I think it's always been a personal emphasis. And my personal favorite passages, Joshua 1:9. Of course, be strong and courageous, don't tremble or be dismayed. But it focused on there to end, the Lord's with you wherever you go. And of course, underlying question of Israel's, we will get into, is God with us or not? And of course, the answer over and over, yes. And then of course, then Jesus comes, Emmanuel. And then when he sends them out at Matthew 28, I will be with you wherever you go. It's like, it's just that reinforcing, the chasing. Of course, God, I think Augustine, is describes God as the hound of heaven.
Yeah.
He's always tracking you down.
So, for yes. Thank
Perspective on the, you got something else?
Nope. I was just
You're reading
just kind of talking.
So what's your perspective on the sons of God in Genesis 6?
I can't wait to hear yours comment on this, because this was the confusing one to me. I mean, I really didn't know what to think.
I had to listen to it 3 times before I really even had something to write down. I don't know if I've just skipped over this my whole life, but once I finally sat down and really focused on this, what I have written down is shows how free will could be our downfall, but we can also be saved by it. It's kind of the thought I kept having. Free will with this is what caused them so many issues, them giving the opportunity to pick and choose what they wanted to do and what not to do. And I think that's what ended up causing the flood, is they were choosing themselves over God, trying to pick and decide what they wanted to do versus doing what they should do. Where we have the ability to pick and choose. You hear people all the time that just went like this, became God-fearing Christians, and moved forward towards a better life, and where they were doing drugs or being thieves or murderers or whatever, turned around into Christ. And that free will is what gave you that option to do that. So that's kind of where my thoughts were after reading that is.
So let me ask a more direct question then.
Yeah, okay.
Do you believe that the sons of God were angelic or fallen angels who had relations with human women? Or do you believe that they were just human beings who were from the line of Seth, who walked with God?
That's a hard one.
Well, I asked because the angel theory, that's been the most popular.
Is the fallen angel.
The fallen angels and had relations with women, and of course some people then attribute them to the Nephilim, which I can't remember his last name, but his first name's Michael. He runs a apologetic channel called Inspiring Philosophy, and he talks about how the internal evidence of the passage is that could actually indicate that the sons of God were just faithful human beings who ended up marrying with those who were unfaithful, and then therefore started kind of falling away. And so by the time we get to Noah's kind of that last, faithful, man who walks with God. Of course, in the fallen angel theory, it's, the bloodline is polluted, which I think she kind of affirms in her materials. That's what, yes, I was just curious of.
I think it's more of what I would call like celebrity status today. I don't truly believe the fallen angels would have happened. Mostly just because, I don't know. Now that I'm really thinking about it, I don't know, but I'll stick to what I'm saying. Just, I think mostly is people who were God-fearing, got with the wrong groups almost, pulled them out to be more self-absorbed to the point of where they believed themselves to be a higher power than what they truly are. And God mentions, these are mortals, you are pretty much God. And is what I got from it. So that's what I'm sticking to. So,
Where are you at, Don?
I'm not sure.
So I don't know. It's just hard to believe the angel side of it for me. Anyways,
It wasn't hard for me
Really?
to believe in that, I guess. I mean,
I guess
look at where we're at.
Yeah.
I mean, but I will agree with you that I think sometimes when you mix the good with the bad, you hope that the good influences the bad, but I think it does.
Yeah, pulls you in.
You're right. It's just. It's just
The
kind
old
of a-
saying, "It's who you hang out with is the image
Right.
of you." Like that's
So I can see
sometimes-
both sides, but I didn't have a problem with the fallen angel.
Yeah, because I was not curious. It was interesting. You know how she talks about the genetic aspect of humanity,
Yeah.
and how it died over time, and so of course with the angel theory, the flow is basically protecting the bloodline for God's eventual plan, which I mean it's within the realm of possibility, but that's where I think you might enjoy Inspiring Philosophy Nephilim in the search bar on YouTube, and you'll be the top one there. But even then, with the progression from Adam and Eve, the disobedience, you've got the murder of Abel. You have then Lamech, who celebrates his violence, begins polygamy, and then of course this seems to multiply. It didn't make sense by the time we get to Noah and the flood. It's like God's like, I need to swipe on this whiteboard here a little bit and
start new.
Yeah.
So, the Tower of Babel, like going back to that,
which is after the flood.
is it okay?
For
That's
the
what
longest time,
I always thought it was
as a kid, I thought the Babel was before, and it was like, well, how does it make sense when the family speaks the same language?
Yeah.
But I read it very often. So
yeah. So, because that's what I was getting confused too. So that makes a little bit more sense now. But yeah, when it comes to that thing, still throws me for a loop. It's hard to understand what they were thinking. At the time, I mentioned this several times. I try to put myself in that situation. That's where my thoughts go sometimes when I need to fill them. So, but just thinking that would be a good idea, trying to pretty much call yourselves gods because you have the ability to build a tower, that's, I'll stop there because that's about as much as I have.
I think, and then to a question, of course, she points out in the reading, but also in Scripture, you see that, they just get back on land, set up a farm. Of course, Noah set up, start a vineyard. There we go. Get the word out. And then got drunk, and it didn't take them long to just fall back in
the evil ways.
Evil ways.
Yeah.
And
or the greedy ways, maybe.
Yeah, because then from there, then we get into the Tower of Babel, where it's like, oh, it's all about us. I'm like, guys, you're only like a generation or two removed from this flood.
You probably still have evidence right now of the flood. So,
and in fact, there's flood stories in different cultures, so they know they at least
there's a flood story
something
in every ancient culture.
Yeah,
I've watched something on this recently, proving, pretty much proving ancient. It's called Ancient Apocalypse. It's pretty much saying that our people were a lot older than we think, and every single known ancient society speaks of a huge flood. So to me, that is not only proof from the Bible, but proof from other sources that happened.
So here's the big question then. Do you believe the ark is still out there somewhere?
They found it.
You sure? You know what I think? They tore it down and built houses and stuff out of it.
Probably that too.
Firewood.
but
is it possible that because there's Ararat and all that stuff, but thinking if the earth is just a muddy mess and it's still drying out, and you've got with you here a giant boat that can survive moisture and probably still reusable,
or did they just live in the boat?
Just leave it sitting there parked,
or did they live in it?
Yeah.
Because that would be me. Why build a house when you already have one? In a boat, and so.
And maybe your great grandson got foolish with the fire and it burnt down.
Yeah.
Sorry, those are thoughts that run through my head.
Now, the proof they have with that, with I can't remember it. You just said it, but in Turkey, like there's no way these natural lines would be made. It's impossible. So to me, I truly believe that is
There's remnants of it.
that is,
I've kinda
it is the
always believed
boat.
that, too.
Yeah, I believe it's possible, but also it's just one of those things
Just
where
how people are,
If we
too.
can find, it's like, well,
I got,
realistically,
yeah.
if we don't find it, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things in life we haven't found either. So,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you read the whole Bible, and is it realistically? I mean,
yeah.
Well, that's where I think we'll get more fun as we get closer to Moses and whatnot. We can talk more about the archaeological stuff that they have found. That's
Yeah. It's
where,
great.
Where I get really excited. Anyways,
Yeah. That one's, I know quite a bit about that part too.
yeah. Do you guys have any more observations you want to make from chapters 1 to 11 before we move over to Job?
I'll just say I really enjoyed it. Catching back up, like you hear the main stories, but you don't really read the chapters between. You hear about Adam and Eve. Obviously the flood. Those are ones you hear as children. That's what your basis of everything is taught on. But you don't. The tower's not brought up much. The sons of
God.
sons of God. I was like, I know it's on there somewhere, but it's nice to go back to this and almost read between the lines. Like read between the stories, kind of go and really get a basis of why our God is the way He is. Like I think this is structuring the way we live our lives. Is just these through these 11 chapters, it answers a lot for me. So I did really enjoy it. So.
Yeah. One connection just to keep in the back of your mind is that the Nephilim, I talk about the mighty warriors that they were viewed as giants, and so that's where part of the perspective when the Israelites go to Canaan, the first time it was like they're giants in the land and we're like insects next to them, and so that it's one thing to think about when we get there and when we get to Exodus is that's what's actually in the back of their mind is that the way these people look, they're thinking Nephilim. Like these people are, they're going to wipe us out. When God's like, no, I'm with you. Go, move forward.
Just go.
So, all right. Well, next we were into Job, chapters 1 to 16, and Job is always an interesting book to read. And
I'll say this is one that I knew nothing about. I don't know if it's a chapter, and I will say I've never read the Bible, cover to cover, and it's not really preached when I grew up that's not something you did. They would pick your passage for you and that's what you would read. And I learned a lot with this. It's hard to believe or not. Let me rephrase this. It's hard to believe as in, I don't believe what it happened, more of hard to believe the situation, I guess. Like God put,
that's where
almost making
the genre
bets,
is interesting because, there's plenty of indications that this was there's some indication that it could be a story that was created to make a point, not necessarily sharing a historical event. Now, whether you believe that's true or not, one way or the other, I mean, that's up to debate. But it's just, the one thing that makes me challenging in reading it is that it's written in poetic form.
Yeah. That is.
I was not a big guy in poetry class in school, and I'm a prose. This happened and this happened.
Say it.
I'm right there with you. But it was eye opening. I think as we really go through all of this, I'm actually really excited because I'm actually get through the whole thing. And every time I'd try to start, I'd find something else or I'd find myself jumping around so much I'd miss something. So I am excited to do this whole thing. So keep me nose to the grindstone, I guess, with this.
So let's start with the first question. And I know we've probably got some other thoughts along the way. Does suffering confuse you like it does Job? How can you tell if you're being punished or disciplined? Because there's a difference. You're experiencing an attack of the enemy, or it's just a natural part of life's hard circumstances. Now, one thing to note as part of the ancient world perspective was that they believed God was always just. So if you were good, you were always going to be rewarded. If you were bad, you were always going to be punished. And so that's the presumption that this is challenging. So anyways, to the question. the suffering confuse you like it does Job?
So I kind of just wrote down a sentence and I'll
Yeah.
go from there. So what I put is, it can be confusing, but it also can be the answer for prayers you got, can be answered to the prayers that you've been asking for. So what I'm meaning by this is sometimes your unanswered prayers are your best prayers, just because of you'll finally get yourself through it, and it could be a great idea, and what you're asking for wasn't. So, but kind of going, I know that didn't really answer the second part, but it can be confusing because once you really get into it, I had a Josh moment there, but yeah, you can be confused at the same time. Because something is happening, we also have to look at it. It doesn't mean you're getting punished because you've not done something bad. It's just God has a different direction for you, is kind of what I was trying to get to. Because there's a lot of things in life where people have done everything right and something terrible has happened. I look at it as a lesson to try to move ourselves forward as good people. Good things come from bad. It's one thing I've always tried to look, one bad thing usually means a lot of good coming later. So, I know that was a whole lot for just the one answer, but,
I can't remember what she said, and I think I even maybe underlined it. I can't remember, but she kind of gave some examples, which I thought was good. Where was that? I don't remember now where I read that, but I think my kind of answer to that was a little bit more, I don't know that I feel punished, but some of my decisions, if they don't glorify the Lord, then that causes circumstances that can look like punishment or disobedience, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference in punishment, but also natural consequences.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know that, as parents, it's one of the things you teach kids, and that, you make them do something. It's like, well, this is the natural consequence of your action, and now here's the punishment, or whatever, whatever may fit the behavior. And so, like, as a kid, if I broke a window because I threw a football, well, I'd have to pay for it. That's a natural consequence. Yeah. Then if my dad took the football away from me for 2 weeks, there's the punishment.
Yeah.
So
I
think that's
explaining.
For part of that question for me. Does suffering confuse me? Less and less as I've matured more in my faith. But I think there is that point in our humanity where we want things to be fair.
Yeah.
If we're good, we want the good stuff to come to us, and of course, sometimes when we try to justify ourselves, we expect mercy or grace when maybe we don't necessarily should, where there might be a punishment.
And here it is on page 27, where she talked about mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. For fallen humanity, we all deserve hell. We've sinned against a holy God and tried to elevate ourselves to his rank. We deserve nothing but punishment.
Yes.
So, I think that's kind of where I was.
I found
On
the
the
rest
other
of my
hand,
answer.
she goes on to say grace is when you get what you don't deserve, and everything over and above not being annihilated. So, I don't know. I just
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
It's a perfect example.
Yeah, and of course, the full enacting of that, of Jesus on the cross, the fullness of mercy, the fullness of grace, to where then we have the gift of salvation, of course, in his resurrection. Then we too receive the grace of resurrection ourselves.
Yeah. Also, in my notes, I have we can't read God's mind, so we just need to trust that He's willing to protect us. You know, sometimes you're not going to be able to tell if you're being disciplined or punished. I feel like as well. You know, you're going to feel like you're being punished, but God might be taking it as discipline, and or vice versa. You know, you just need to really trust in Him that He's going to take care of you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And as long as you believe, He should be able to. So.
Mm-hmm.
Let me rephrase that. He has the reason to, as long as we believe and do the right thing.
Well, and then she kind of finished with that, is that God might still show him mercy, Job, because he knows God's character.
Yeah.
So that is what you have to rely on, is that our God is good.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And Job's character, I mean, it's of course it's designed to stand out here as we read the story. What's interesting is that, as a dad, he knows his children are partying. I mean, he's like, they're not pulling a fast one on dad, but he goes and he makes the sacrifices for his kids when he knows that they've done parties. Like maybe they've goofed or done something really stupid, so I'm going to provide the sacrifice for them. So it just, part of his character just blows me away, is that he himself is one who's willing to look after his kids and through the lens of like mercy and grace.
I just keep thinking that these are spoiled kids. I come from a family where my dad's not doing anything for you without your help. So that's where that's, I guess it's a little old fashioned for today's saying, but, I keep thinking, if you're truly wanting to save your kids, why don't you bring them into that fold? Make them get up and go and sacrifice this with them so that you can try to save them, their future selves. But yeah, that's where my mind was going while reading that. Come on, like there's a point of, you got to sink or swim. And if you're wanting to live this life, we need to do this to try to correct it. So I don't know. That's where I was. That's where my mind kept going to.
As a seasoned mother.
That's just, I think as parents too, we tend to, I would probably be like Job, I would be trying to fix their.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably more of a chance that parents today do that versus sink or swim.
Yeah. No.
Because we have lost a lot of
Sinker.
discipline.
You're more of a Jeff Foxworthy parent. You want to put a penny in a light socket? Go ahead and try that out.
Yeah.
Hurts, don't it? Don't do that no more.
I am. I very much am. As she gets older, I might not
I was
be,
going
but
to say, let's check back in 10 years.
We'll see.
You're gonna be ready to go all Brian Mills, like Taken. When she starts dating, it's like, boy,
we're not going to start that. She's already signed that contract. No dating till 2052. So.
Good luck with that one too.
She'll be 34 years old, or 32 years old. So, no, yeah, we're in a different life. Got another one on the way too, so we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
But I don't. I think there's things for us to strive to what Job has done. Being willing to do whatever for your children, and to believe in Christ. And then I think there's other things where we take this as a lesson of what not to do. Mm-hmm. On top of my head, that was something I have.
Look at it too. I guess.
I don't have any evidence to back that up right now. I just have that written down in my notes, and I don't remember what I going there. I'm sure I could find it, but it'd be a little bit.
I think again, the focus is on Job's characters, not as spoiled little kids.
Yeah. Well, as a parent, some of that is on the parent.
Mm-hmm. But I think again, as the focus is on Job's character, where Job is of that quality, where the tempter, the Satan, the adversary, depending on the translation, he goes, God's basically bragging about Job and knows Job so well that he's like, he's not gonna mess up, but he's not going to forsake me either.
Yeah.
Of course, Job has his struggles in his dialogue, and of course, he still has to be corrected by God, as we'll see when we get to the end of the book. But Job's of a quality where even God, brags there at the heavenly court how faithful one of his people is.
Yeah.
So just, Job just stands out, and one who's willing to suffer, because he does well in his suffering, even though his wife doesn't help.
Yeah.
Curse God and die. I mean, thanks, babe.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Appreciate
Yeah.
the word of encouragement. And even as we get progress into the next few chapters that's covered in our week here, is that he does pretty good until his friends show up.
Yeah.
And they're good
That's-
when they don't talk, but it's when they start speaking that then we, of course, we get into the challenges.
Yeah.
And so, you guys, you see in their responses, and of course, it's in the poetic form, which that's challenging for me to stay excited about because of the form. But anyways, basically, all those three friends just show up, and it's like, Job, you messed up. You just can't remember.
You're not
You just-
recognizing.
You just need to repent, and your kids were brats, and you did something wrong that God's earning for. Because again, the perception of justice is that God is always going to reward good and always going to punish bad. Of course, we know better now, but again, that was the ancient world's belief, and so. So my next kind of observation and question to you guys is what do you think about Job's friends who are no help at all? And of course, what's your guys' experience when you've gone through suffering? Because that's related to one of our questions.
It is at number 8.
Yeah, number 8. Did you find it challenging to sit in silence with people in their pain? Are you inclined to fix the problems? What approach do you appreciate most in your life?
I'm a fixer,
I
unfortunately.
think that's natural. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's
And
what
today,
we want to do. We
you
want
wanna-
somebody to feel better and to.
Not always in a productive way am I a fixer. I will say that. My wife will say that I will give all the ideas, but they're not what the answer she's wanting. But for me personally, I want to figure it out myself. At the end of the day, I will usually take as bad as this sounds, if it's really bad, everyone's opinion as a grain of salt, and I'll move on with my own. And it's just easier if I don't get the opinions most of the time, which isn't a good thing, but that's just kind of how I was raised. You need to figure, if you have an issue, especially if you've caused, you need to figure out how to get yourself out of that hole. So, and I'm truly grateful for that, but yeah, it's kind of how I'm wired, I guess. So that is the approach I usually go with it. But I think there's times it's perfectly fine to be silent. I just remember a close death of mine when I was in high school. We had 36 kids sitting in the living room of his parents' house. Not a word was said. Just being there is what people needed. You don't have to say a word that, hey, I'm thinking of you and doing it. By showing up and not saying a word is sometimes better because then they don't have to think of what to say. You go from there. So there's a lot of words in silence as it can be good or bad, but sometimes silence is just as good as trying to come up with something to say.
Yep. How about you?
That was me. I mean, I think, again, you want to try to fix the problem, but I prefer somebody just sit with me in silence, and so therefore I'm going to do that same thing.
Or just get your mind off of it. Like, talk to me about anything other than XYZ. So
one of the stories I learned in seminary about pastoral care is that sometimes people need a sense of normalcy during the times of crisis. It tells a story of going to visit a widow recently, and I think it was something at her house. I don't know if it was right after the funeral or a couple of days after, but it was very soon after. And of course, she welcomes him in, and she asks the pastor, "Can I get you anything?" And he said, "Sure, I could use this." And apparently, it was a kerfuffle in the house because, just ask the widow to do something for you. We should be doing stuff for her. And for her, she acknowledged it was a sense of normalcy because she loved hospitality. That was one of her gifts, one of her drives. And so for her, that was a sense of normalcy to what, since she's had lost that with this emotional roller coaster of losing her husband.
Witnessed that firsthand. When my great grandfather passed away, that's my grandma and my great grandma didn't want to be pampered. They wanted to do, which my grandma is one of those that does everything above and beyond anyways, but they wanted to go get the drinks. They wanted to make the food. They wanted to do XYZ because not only got their mind off of it, but it put them in a happy place, because that's how my grandpa was too. He was a helper. He was there to help anyone, give a shirt off their back, and they wanted to continue that on that day. So yeah, I've been right there with that, and it's 100% true. I think it honestly helped them more than anything. So
I'm thinking of Tim Hawkins' joke where if he wants people to laugh and smile when he passed away, and so he's like, I want to have a big bowl of candy on my chest so when people come by.
Oh my!
And it's like, that. It's definitely in line with his character.
It's funny you said that, because I told Amy the other day, I don't want anyone wearing black at my funeral. I don't really care for I have some blacks. I think I'm wearing black right now, but that's, to me, I feel like I'm kind of lively guy, and don't like, let's not be sad.
Celebration. Then.
Yeah, like I like the term celebration of life a lot more than funeral. I've never heard that until a close friend of our sister passed away of cancer, and they had a celebration of life, and it was light and lightened the mood. It made it, people were laughing. Like sometimes you go to some funerals and it's like, can't laugh, can't do anything, can't say jokes or whatever. Like I would love just everyone to be happy, and I'm in a better spot, hopefully. So let's move on.
Well, there's times I'll sit with the family and they'll start telling stories, and that's what I'm there. I want to hear stories so I can prepare. And of course, it's like, well, you probably won't be able to use this story, but they'll tell it to me, and I'm writing it down. It's like, I'm absolutely using this story. And so there was a man, I did a funeral at my first church, and his daughters would talk about how he just buy old cars, drive into dirt and buy, just basically, nothing new, just old. And they had this minivan or station wagon, and it had color, it was painted weird, bright colors, and so they called it the pimp wagon. And so I made reference to the pimp wagon during the service, and lo and behold, we are prepared. I finished the graveside, and the daughters are just snickering, trying not to laugh. And of course, I'm peace be with you, and they're like, you said pimp wagon in church. And so and then of course I saw them a couple years later, and that was the first thing they talked about.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that where just it's real, and it's a celebration. I mean, that was Dad.
Yeah. So there's nothing better than something like that. I feel like in mourning you need to laugh, and 5 years later, my grandpa passed away too last week. It's 5 years ago. So still hard, but especially when someone's your hero. And, I still try to remember the good stories and talking about just the little things at his funeral too. Just, the littlest stories that remind you of it. So yeah, it's good to laugh. So, and times of mourning.
Yes, for sure. So Joe believes God is ultimately sovereign over both of his troubles and his hope. Are these things hard to reconcile? Why or why not? What do you think, Don?
This was a question I've struggled with.
I skipped entirely, I guess. So
I don't know how I feel about this one.
Well, so here's what makes, I think, part of this challenging is that I'm not sure about Tara-Lee's Cobble's background, but she might be from a Reformed tradition where less free will, more focused on God's sovereignty, and
almost like a Calvinist.
Probably part of that tradition. I'd have to look it up, so don't quote me. Don't send any nasty emails.
Yeah, Tara.
If you're a Tara-Lee Cobble fan. And so I think that's where part of the question. Of course, there's Reformed Calvinist folks who make concessions for free will, and so I think that's where part of this. I think for me is that I don't think it's hard to reconcile, because in the fact that God's not moving us like puppets, He's not orchestrating hurricanes and grass fires like puppets, and He's not dictating or always giving permission for demons to cause problems to whether it's our health or an event. And so I think for me, God is sovereign, but He also has created this world to where, I'm pulling back from some of my apologetic stuff, is that because we have free will, this way we know love from God and love from our spouses, friends, for each other as Christians is genuine, because it's not forced. Yeah. It's not a program. We're not in the Matrix, so to speak.
The simulation.
So that's why for me it's not hard to reconcile, because this then creates the space for love to truly and genuinely exist. Yeah. And so
that makes a lot of sense.
Since God's not orchestrating things like everything like a puppet master, you're in a world that is in essence, as I've heard one description, wild and in a sense even unsafe, because people have the freedom to choose to be dirtbags or sandpaper people, but of course then we have the right to choose to follow God into love. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. To me, free will is a lot.
Analogy.
Yeah,
I like that one.
Yeah. I just truly don't believe we could be who we are without free will. Like, yes, God knows what decision we're going to make, but He gives us the ability to make that decision. Like the simulation, Calvinist, that everything's already been planned out. It's just hard for me to grasp that and believe it. So,
yeah. Because you'd be like, well, did you actually choose to wear that shirt today?
Yeah. Well, obviously I did, and contradicted myself, right? Well, I did. So actually, it was sitting on the counter and it was cold out, so I picked it up and put it on. So I did, by free will, wear this.
Most days, my clothes 3 times before I went to work this morning. I wish God would have just picked out my outfit.
There is some days I do not have free will. My wife tells me what to wear. So, but those are few and far between.
Well, and I think here's the thing too, because some people, question, does God, if God knows, does it mean we're actually free? Well, in a sense, okay, did martial arts with my buddies. I knew if I went up and slapped one of them, I know he would come back swinging.
Yeah.
Now, did I dictate, his response? No. Yeah, but because I knew what he did, does that dictate his response? No. It's just I know who he is and how he would respond. But of course, part of that friendship is as we grow, we change, and of course, we didn't learn to not just respond back in violence if someone to smack us in the face. That's always been my go-to analogy. Yeah. But I think that's part of what you said made me think about that, is that God knows us, and of course He searches the minds and tests our hearts to hopefully intervene in guiding us through the Holy Spirit, so that we can grow to become who we're supposed to be, since sin has corrupted our nature.
I think without free will, if it was truly a simulation, He wouldn't have all these atrocities happening. Is my thought. He's still giving us the chances to make these choices. So if He would have made it to where He's making all these decisions, why would we have had these bad things? So that's where my mind
there wouldn't have been a fall in Eden.
Yeah,
because if everything was programmed by a puppet, well, why would He?
Why would He?
Yeah. We're there. We're there.
Yeah.
You there?
I think so.
Pretty much just saying He wouldn't let all this terrible things happen if the free will wasn't a thing.
Oh. So I'll read the last question here, and then whatever final thoughts we have as we wrap up. So what is your favorite thing to read about God's character in your God shots from the week? So for those of you who may just be following along in the Bible reading but not following on the book, the God shot is something that kind of summarizes the main point of what Tara Lee Koppel focuses on for the section of reading, and so it's just it's either just a couple sentences or a short paragraph,
which are really good, by the
Yeah.
way. So
Oh, yeah.
I would encourage them to get the book if
Yeah.
they're really following along, because I think she helps just put it together. And I will go back to that where she talks about the mercy is when you don't get what you deserve for fallen humanity. We all deserve hell. That, I think that was my favorite reading, because it just kind of put it all into perspective for me a little bit. That we really don't deserve anything less than hell, and so we have this sovereign God who is taking care of us when we really don't deserve it. So I think that was kind of my favorite part of her summary, I guess I should say, and that he does show us mercy.
Yeah.
The one thing that stood out to me was there on day one at the end, and it's just because we're going through Philippians in the sermon series. It's like he doesn't give up on pursuing us because he's where the joy is.
And that's what I was, yeah.
That was really right
Well,
there.
I've kind of noticed that throughout reading this, that's each one of them, she ends with that. And that was kind of what I was going to say is
Yeah.
she reaffirms God is that joy. So I'm sorry to mean to cut you off.
No,
but
you're good.
He
Yeah.
did.
I mean,
She does
that's
say
just-
that, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I didn't put that together, but she does say that in every one of them.
So
He's where the
yeah.
joy is.
So that's kind of where I was at with that. Like that's kind of just that not repetitive, but almost like the Bible, like reaffirms.
Reaffirms, yeah.
So much stuff is she's reaffirming to us that He is the joy.
And you know, and just thinking of that, and I've used this quite a bit in this last month because you know how well I love January.
Yeah.
When I get down or depressed, I feel like it is up to me to find the joy.
Yeah.
And where I do find my joy is when I go back and search God.
Yeah.
Usually when I'm on my knees and say, this has been a crummy day, that's when I find my joy.
Yeah. Just takes that pressure off of you, and He takes it and moves it on. And it's a great way of, I think that's a great thing to end on, honestly.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask if there was any final thoughts, anything that you thought else was interesting.
But
Honestly,
That
I'm
would-
not really looking forward to the rest of Job. Just because it's just kind of drama and whiny.
yeah.
But I will muster through it.
So I will say, because I've been going through, I've been going through the Jewish Study Bible, and it was interesting how it starts, because in most of our Christian Bibles, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, and part of that in the beginning comes from the Hebrew word that basically translates in the beginning. Well, in my Hebrew Study Bible, so no New Testament. They started this way: when God began to create heaven and earth. So even though traditionally it makes good sense to translate it in the beginning, they don't do that in this
began.
translation.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to read. So a Bible a practicing Jewish person would use. So it's stretching me to not assume.
Yeah. You know what they say
A
about
whole lot.
assuming.
Especially on the wording of the translation. So,
No,
all right. Anything else?
Super excited for this. It's a lot of fun. So
Great start.
I was gonna say, if anyone's looking to get it, Amazon is backdated to like March or April. I
These
found
books. Oh,
for this exact study guide, Christianbooks.com had it. That's where I ordered Dawn and I's from. They have the leather bound one and the one like Dawn has, and it was the same price. Got it in a couple days. Got some free books with it. So not a sponsored post, but if they want to,
We
they're
do
more
not get
welcome
any
to.
money, but we're willing to receive any
Compensation
Yep.
or a couple free books to give away.
sponsoring or donations.
But just thought I'd throw that out there if people were looking for that. And they had the study guides on there as well. They had the whole set if you wanted to buy.
Yeah, because they have a journal, they have a daily study guide thing, and of course, like we're
weekly.
using the weekly study guide. Whoops, we're putting the view of the camera there. If you're wanting to join us in particular with the Bible recap materials.
And kind of like with the last one, if people are wanting to comment questions or have comments in general about this, put that down below, likes and all that fun stuff. And
Yeah. Hit that like button. Hit
Yeah.
that share button if you enjoyed it.
yep, please share. Let's get this out, the message out to as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Feel like a YouTuber right there.
We just can't tell him when to hit subscribe just yet.
Yeah, not
Just
yet. Well, someday.
Yeah. Once I get around to
Follow.
developing our YouTube channel, then we can tell you
Yeah.
to subscribe.
Subscribe, unsubscribe. That's what they all say.
We
don't
have
they?
one.
It's maybe a long year.
All right, everyone.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week.
Yep.
I will post on the Facebook page our next reading, so please keep your eyes out for that. Take care. God bless.
Bye.